I think the best bit of advice I ever received concerning firearms came from my grandmother. I don't know whether this was something that she had heard from someone else or whether this was something that she had figured out for herself. But her words to me were, if you give him half a chance when your back is turned, the devil will put a bullet in your gun and make it go off. Well, of course, that's not exactly true. But the consequences of an accidental discharge at times are so horrendous that one might be forgiven thinking that there was something supernatural behind it all. We didn't have many ADs, as I can remember, in the Rhodesian War. They weren't commonplace, but we certainly did have them. And I can remember on one occasion that we were up near Koroi at a battle camp. The army liked to spend a few days before we actually went into the bush, just bringing us up to speed, as it were. And on this occasion, we were all tired. We had spent the day on a jungle lane. We had then done skirmishing with live rounds, and we were all very weary at the end of it all. And I can remember the man next to me, after we had eaten and we were about to settle down, he decided that he would clean his weapon. I saw him out the corner of my eye take it and lay it down on his sleeping bag, and I didn't pay much attention until the next moment there was this almighty bang near me, and all heads swung in his direction, and this poor man just sat there with a horrified expression on his face, as if to say, was that me? What happened? How is this possible? And the army, of course, took a very dim view of this kind of thing. Originally, I believe it was 180 days detention barracks, and this was later revised to 28 days DB. And of course, as to be expected, our platoon lieutenant came running in, looked around, asked us if we were all okay. We said yes, and he just took one look at this man next to me. He didn't. The lieutenant never said a word. None of us said anything, and it really wasn't necessary. This man was a first-class soldier in every other respect. If we had to guess who amongst us would ever have an accidental discharge, I can assure you this man's name would have been at the bottom of the list. We would never have thought it possible that he was capable of such an oversight. And yet it happened. On that occasion, it was just a bang, and we all got a fright, and that was it. The lieutenant never said anything. He just left, and we never said anything either, and it wasn't necessary. This was something that we knew that this man would never ever repeat again in his life. But about a year later, when I was with another company, we were on quite a big exercise. We were supposed to observe a particular village where it was suspected there was a terrorist presence, and we set off at night. About, I think it must have been about 8 or maybe even as many as 12 different call signs, and we were going to completely surround this village at daybreak the following day. And so we left at night. We marched through the night. The next day it was drizzly, and it was a really miserable day, and I was feeling miserable. I was sick with flu. I never said anything to anybody, but it was really agony for me. And we came to the base of this hill that we had to climb up in order to situate ourselves in an OP position. And we got about halfway up this hill, and thankfully our corporal said, let's take a break till later in the afternoon, and we'll climb up in the evening, and come the next morning we'll be ready to start doing our work. And we had come to a sort of a depression on the side of this hill. It was quite a nice sheltered spot. the grass was damp and wet as I can remember, but that didn't bother me. I just wanted to lie down and just see if I could rest and maybe feel better later in the day. And so I unrolled my sleeping bag and I spread it out on the grass. The corporal said he'd take the first watch and the rest of us could take a break. Two of the men moved over to my left and they settled down with their backs against an enormous granite rock. I sat down on the sleeping bag and I started to lean back, and as I did so, BOW! A round whistled over the top of me. It was so close. A few more milliseconds later, and it would have gone right through my lungs. And I looked across in shock at our corporal, and he was sitting there with his firearm across his knees, and he had that same expression on that I saw that time at the battle camp. Like, was that me? How did this happen? Was it possible? He looked down at the weapon, he looked at us. He was totally bewildered. His mind could not catch up with what had happened. And I looked across to my left. The bullet had hit the rock, and the rock had splintered, and a piece of this had gone into the armpit of one of the soldiers. And I got to my feet and ran across to him. I couldn't believe the blood that was coming out. It reminded me of black motorcar oil, and I thought, oh no, I hope this hasn't hit something vital in him. I mean, this is awful. And the other man helped him cover the wound, and of course then the radio came alive. With people on the surrounding hills radioing in their positions and radioing in the direction of the noise they had heard. Well, what we used to do in the Rhodesian army, if we were in the bush and we heard an explosion or a contact, we would take our compasses and take a bearing on that, and then radio this with our position back to our platoon or our company base, and very quickly on the map in the ops tents and the ops rooms, they would very quickly plot the position of that sound. And it was amazing how accurate this would be. Sometimes landmine explosions or bridges that had been blown up were identified in this way with pinpoint accuracy. And of course our corporal was called on the radio because he had not responded to this noise, and by that time everybody knew that it had emanated from us. And the whole operation was of course compromised and called off, and we were all told to, abandon the exercise and to get down on the road, and we were all collected duly and taken back to our company base. The wounded soldier recovered. He was okay, as it turned out. He survived that. I don't know what happened to the corporal, but I would strongly suspect that he had his ears thoroughly chewed off over that. In fact, the next time I saw him, he was doing something else. They'd given him some other work to do, and I was relieved of work for a few days in order that I might recover from my bout of flu, which of course I did eventually. On that occasion, that AD had resulted in a man being wounded. But sometimes it wasn't a story with a happy ending. I came back from a patrol one day, and we were all based up at our company HQ at that time. And as I got off the truck, I heard an MAG firing, and one of our officers I could see a little way off was lying on an anthill, and he was pointing the machine gun off at a hill in the distance, and he was firing short bursts and long bursts and stopping, and examining the weapon, loading and unloading it. And I didn't pay too much attention because one of the things that we did from time to time was to test fire our weapons, and I thought it was something like that. And so I went over to where our platoon was bivouacked, and I started sorting my stuff out and so on. And then I noticed that this firing kept on going. It didn't seem to go away. And I walked across to where another soldier was watching this. And I remember he was smoking a cigarette, and I said to him, "What's going on?" And he took the fag out of his mouth, and he said, "The lieutenant can fire that all day if he likes. He's not going to find anything wrong with it." Now, I didn't know what had happened, and so I asked him, "Well, what was behind it all?" And he said, "Hadn't I heard?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Oh, we lost a man this morning." And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "These guys were out on ambush. In the morning they got up, and the MAG gunner picked up the gun, and the guys were taking too long, and so he put it down impatiently, and as he put it down on the ground on its bipod, it fired a single round, and the bullet went through one man and into another, and as a result somebody died." Well, I was very shocked at this. So he said, "Yeah, they're testing the weapon. There's an inquiry going on. They're trying to find out why this thing discharged itself." He said, "But he's wasting his time. He's going to find nothing wrong with that weapon." So I said, "But why do you say that?" So he said, "I can tell you exactly what's happened over there." He said, "The gunner must have cocked the weapon, but he never cocked it properly, and he eased the moving parts forward, and it's hooked up on one of the rounds on the belt." And he said that weapon must have been like that for a while, probably right through the night when they were on ambush. He said he picked it up in the morning. Safety is not going to work because the moving parts aren't backwards. And he said when he banged it down on the ground, that's all it needed. He said that weapon's got a fixed firing pin, and it picked up the round, put it in the chamber, and it fired. And he said, unfortunately, that's what he thinks had happened. Well, I'm not an armourer, and I've never been able to find out that what he said to me was logical or true, but he seemed pretty convinced. And it was a very sad thing. You know, it's one matter to get called up and to go off into the bush and to leave your family behind, and get wounded or maybe even get killed in a contact with terrorists. But it seems such an awful waste when you lose your life through an accident. And one has to be fatalistic, I think, about these things sometimes, otherwise you'd go crazy. And now 4 decades have gone by since that day, and Rhodesia doesn't exist anymore. The war has been over a long time. People don't remember what happened, but that gunner, if he knew that an oversight on his part caused the death of a comrade, what an awful burden it must be to bear. And there's nobody that can help you with that. I mean, we were soldiers, we were not murderers. To think that you have taken the life of one of your own friends. Oh, what a terrible thing. What a terrible thing. And so time goes by and everything else is forgotten, but that poor man has to carry that knowledge to the grave with him. Yeah. If you give him half a chance while your back is turned, he'll put a bullet in your gun and make it go off. Don't forget that if you handle firearms.